online or in books about what to do when you have a finished manuscript, whether you're looking to shop a nonfiction book or a fiction book, how to get an agent. And these days, self-publishing is a viable option, so how to self-publish. All of that, I think the Internet is full of really wonderful resources.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because, you started off as a journalist first and then went into, writing your novels. And I'm just curious how you feel about the self-publishing industry, which has certainly gotten a lot more legitimate in the last few years. And you made a very important statement that I think listeners really, I don't know if they picked up on it or not. You said, well, it's 2 years until it hits the shelves. When someone writes a book, whatever it is, whether it's a novel or nonfiction, they anticipate seeing it immediately, and they anticipate, well, I've got this thing done now. 6 months later, everybody's going to see it, and it's not like that because it takes a while. So, what is your feeling about going to what people call a legitimate publisher, and your self-publishing avenues that are available today?
I think that they're both viable, and people have to decide what's best for them. I know several authors who published books through, the big publishers, and then turned around and began sort of self-publishing. And I have one author I know who's done extraordinarily well. Her self-published books are, constant bestsellers. So I think it's sort of what you want to do and how you want to do it. There's definitely, pros to, I like working with an editor. I've been on this extensive tour for Leave Me all around the country for the last 6 weeks. That's something that a publisher, when they're behind a book, will really do. But I think that there's been plenty of cases recently with people who either didn't try to publish through the traditional realms or had no success, and then self-published and found success. And then, of course, publishers come calling because maybe they want to print paper copies of your book, or maybe they want to see about, expanding your book's reach internationally. So I think that they are both viable ways, and people just kind of need to do research and figure out what works best for them.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's great. And you've just said another thing, which is amongst the people that I know, and that's this book tour that you're on. I had a friend who wrote a book. And he said he'd never do this again, but he wrote a book and he rented a bus, a huge bus, and then he wrapped it with the title of his book. And he traveled across the country in this bus with this, this wrapping around it that said the title of his book. And he caused a sensation wherever he went, of course. And it was a very catchy title. And, but he said he would never do it again. And I just wonder if you do publish something on your own, most people, even with a publisher behind it, though, Gayle, they have to pay for their tours that they do and the promotions they do. So you're very lucky that you've got this behind you.
Oh, I am aware of that. And touring is grueling, but at the same time, when you're touring, you also recognize that it's a privileged position to be in. And it's, I think touring is great because it allows you to go out and you connect with readers and you beat booksellers, and that's wonderful. But at the beginning of my career, I didn't tour very much at all. I think If I Stay, when it came out in paperback, was the first time that I toured, because there is that thing, like you can go from place to place, but if nobody knows who you are and nobody has become aware of your book, then what is the point? So I think that it's sort of advisable if people are thinking of self-publishing and touring, I don't know, I would try and help your book find an audience first, and then you're kind of going out to support that once that audience has been found. So, I'm going on this big tour for Leave Me because I'm trying to reach a new audience, but at the same time, I have an existing audience as well. So we're kind of in that middle ground where I'm a very established author who's also a debut author.
Wow. Well, I would say, so, that brings me to my next question. Are you going to stay with the adult format, or are you going to go back to the young adult format? Or, what?
I'll do both. And back to your very first question about the difference between the two, I think that there's this misconception that young adult authors are kind of all reliving their adolescence because it was so awful. So they relive their adolescence in their novels, and I think that that's true for some. I think that I've met authors who have said, "Oh my God, my teen years were terrible, and this was like a do-over." For me, that's not the case. All of my young adult novels have been about things that adult me is grappling with, but for whatever reason, it has been these characters between the ages of like 17 and 25 who have come to mind to kind of tell the story. So it's no different process writing young adult or adult. But the question is, like, what is the thing that is weighing on me, and who is the best character to tell this story? So in some cases, it's, if I'm writing about marriage and motherhood, it's not going to be an 18-year-old. But if I'm writing about other things that are on my mind, it depends. So it depends who kind of comes to me. But I figure I'm a Gemini. I'm comfortable with duality. I will continue to do both.
First of all, you're an author who has a lot of personality. I cannot tell you how many authors I've interviewed who really are not as fascinating as their book. Let's put it like that. And you really do come across so well. So I want to ask you about your kids. Where are they in this phase of reading or writing or being interested in telling a story? And did you read a lot to them from the very beginning, or tell us a little bit about that?
I have two daughters. They are 9 and 12. My 12-year-old has been a voracious reader, but these days, it seems to have cooled a bit because her school is so intense and full of pressure that she comes home and she kind of wants to zone out. So I'm trying to be faithful that she will come back to it, and also limiting her screen time so that she has no choice but to pick up a book. My younger daughter was a more reluctant reader, but then fell in love with graphic novels. She's a very visual person, and so she loves graphic novels. And now she has started writing a book, and she's told me it's going to be a series, and she's asked me if my publisher will publish it. So it's adorable. Both of my kids I have read to since they were, babies. And my older daughter fired me about 3 years ago. So now at night I can just crawl into bed and lay next to her while we both read, and then I fall asleep. And my little one, I still read to. So just last night she was all hopped up on Halloween candy because it's the morning after, or that was the night of, and I read to her until she fell asleep.
That's fabulous. That's great. Well, are there things that I have not asked you that you would like our listening audience to know? Because we've got about maybe 2-3 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we get everything out about your book and especially your experiences that you would like our audience to know. So what are some of the things that I haven't asked you?
Well, the interesting thing about Leave Me out talking to people right now is, this is about a woman who has a heart attack and bypass surgery and comes home in the aftermath of all this to find her family is still leaning on her, and feeling herself deteriorate, she runs away. And the really interesting thing about traveling around the country talking to readers, particularly women, is how prevalent this running away fantasy is, but how everybody thinks it's this secret, shameful thing. Meanwhile, everybody has this running away fantasy. So it's very interesting, the kind of conversations that we've been having about why it is such a taboo for a mother to even talk about wanting to leave her kids, where if it's the father leaving the kids, it's oh yeah, that happens all the time. So it's been a very, very interesting couple of months, and it's sort of been reflected on what's been going on politically in the news about how women and men are judged by different standards. So it's been a pretty provocative read in a way that I hadn't intended it to be when I first wrote it.
Wow. Well, I think it's wonderful. I think the fact that your kids are reading is so fabulous. I mean, I have a great grandchild, and he is reading.
Wow! Congratulations.
His mom's a teacher. Thank you. And he's reading, and he loves to read, and I'm so happy about that, because I think it's lost a little bit of its panache, shall we say, and I'm just thrilled that that's happening.
I would
So
blame less the digital distraction than I would what is happening in schools where kids are being kind of forced to read earlier on and being given books that just are not resonant for them. I love my daughter's school. They let her read all the graphic novels she wants. But I think that with our desire to have our kids be well educated, we've confused sort of an inaccessible hard book for a good book. And if a kid can't find a way into a book, then reading becomes a chore. So I think, the more a kid reads, I don't care what they read, because it's a habit that will develop lifelong. And that's why my 12-year-old, not being quite the voracious reader that she once was, bringing books to the dinner table, I'm not worried about it. I know that she loves it. She knows she can escape into the world of a book anytime she wants, and that will be something she'll do throughout her life.
Well, I want to thank you for being with us today, Gayle. It's been a pleasure. And everybody listening, this is an Oprah book choice. You have got to read this book. So again, my wonderful guest has been Gayle Forman, who, by the way, spells her name the way I do. And the novel is Leave Me. Thank you so much for being with us today, Gayle. I really know that my listeners are getting a lot from this. Thanks so much.
Wonderful. Take care.